Okay, hi troops. This will be our first lecture here for Community Engaged Design Practice. We'll be recording this and uploading it onto Canvas. Welcome. And we've got a couple housekeeping items that we're going to be going over first before we move into our next component. A couple things here. We are going to be doing this on Canvas, so it is critical that we use our CU email addresses. Our online identity and how we communicate in Canvas is important. If you guys could, please go ahead and add in here just a bio on each of you. A picture if you want, you don't have to, would be great. I've done mine. Also, methods of communication, I've got on there my phone, email, Twitter, Facebook, just about everything I can think of. We also do have a Philly private secret group, Facebook, which as we get ready to move into more Philadelphia-based work, we'll be using that, but for the moment we won't. It's really easy to link your CU email to whatever regular email you use. Please, I've made a YouTube video of it. It's 2 minutes long. This is the link to that YouTube video. Please go ahead and look at it and get that done. Thanks. Next one, Zoom. We'll be using Zoom for all of our interactive sessions. One thing about Zoom, it is free, but you need to get the university account. Otherwise, 10 minutes into our session, if you are hosting one, it will tell you that you have to pay money. So please go to UC Denver, right there, .zoom.us, and get yourself an account set up. If you've got any questions on this and how it works, again, I have done a very simple little YouTube video. It too is only about 2 minutes. So take a look at that, watch it, and make sure you get your Zoom account set up. It's really helpful for sharing screens, group discussions. It does require a good internet access. We'll want to make sure we won't be using wireless, but once we get ready to do that, we'll do another tutorial on that as well. Next, an active Google Drive account. I have invited all of you, at least your CU emails, to our Google Drive. So this is where we will keep all of our large files and data. So go ahead and accept that invitation from me. Please, each of you set up a student folder, and then I will set up a resource section for each one of our modules that we'll be working on. Okay, in a nutshell, we've got 6 modules, which will be assignments in effect. We will start off with the green morass, the just plethora of standards, concepts around green sustainability and how that deals with the environment and people and everything else. Some of this may be a duplication of information you all already know. It could be a little bit of a refresher, but I think it'll be an important place for us to begin and start. The second piece of that module will be looking at school-related materials specifically. Today, once we get through this housekeeping stuff, we will be going into sort of that larger national arena and what that looks like. The syllabus is up, and this first module is also up on Canvas, so take a look. Next one, we'll be spending a couple weeks looking at City of Networks, specifically getting into aspects of Philadelphia, what's going on there. Starting to look at the idea of hybrids, how that really starts to relate the interconnectedness between building, community, and person and landscape from an ecological model standpoint. At that point, we'll introduce our site. Then we will be spending a large portion of time up until spring break thinking about integration strategies. I think one of the things that you'll notice in this as we're moving forward is the nuances when you start to have a sustainable or ecological model is that the systems do not recognize the difference between inside, outside, or building or landscape because it's a systems approach. And so as landscape architects, we need to really be savvy about that interconnectedness. And so we'll be starting to be looking at strategies around that. Then we'll have spring break. Then we'll be getting into refinement of those models. And then we will spend some time doing an evaluation of it. What do we think? How does it work? We'll be rolling that back into this original module 1 in terms of all of these different systems and schedules, and what do we really think about those? Are they really helping us? Are they going to get to the point where they're confusing people? And what do we do with our existing governmental regulations? At some point, when do we actually roll all of this information into government regulations and not having a whole separate method of generating money and generating standards? So that's where we'll be with that. Emails and Canvas. This class will be 100% on Canvas. I will provide discussion items and all communication will be through Canvas. I say this because I am as much to blame. So this is about getting rid of old habits. It's so easy to just do an email. It's fast and quick, but it really starts to sort of break down the process. So I am not going to use emails. I will do all communication with you via Canvas. I will respond to any emails within 24 hours. I expect all of you to do the same thing. Check your Canvas regularly. Check for any kind of communication. And then hopefully we can start to get some lively conversations as we're getting together and going through these. If there's something that you found really interesting on a module, on our first module, and you want to share it with the group, please do. We will be doing these as individual assignments, but hopefully we'll be building a body of information and knowledge together as we start to share these components. So that will be important. I will be sending out a doodle invite to sort of find a good time where when we do need to have interactive sessions, we can. I will do that. I'm going to try to do that through Canvas. That should be interesting. I'm not quite sure how to do that. I will hopefully try to get that done before Tuesday. Okay. Next one. There are some interactive tools that I think are interesting that can be used. Mind mapping and Prezi are two that I think can be helpful. Prezi is interesting in that it is an online program and can be shared with other people. Mind mapping, essentially, and these are the 5 essential characteristics of it. It's the idea that there is a main idea that is focused around a central image or concept. For this exercise, it would be sustainability. And from there radiate out different branches from that central theme. It's better than the typical sort of flow chart that is more binary or linear in its approach. And it really allows you to add and expand things in a much more user-friendly way once you get used to how that concept works. My preference in terms of mind mapping is MindMeister. It is an online program. There is a basic one that is free. So take a look at this. It's the one that I have used and have enjoyed using. You can sign up. It will start to track and keep them for you. If I can do this. No, it didn't like me. So I'm going to probably not try to do this right now, but see if I have one open. Try doing Gmail correctly. We can also then share these among each other if there are ways to. So usually what happens once you log in, here are these 3 different ones. I stay basic. It asks you each time what you want to be, and I just, at this point, stay basic. I find it to be the best one. And then here you can see my list of different maps. My first one, here's a typical schoolyard coordinated construction. Here's one taking a look at funding. So here you can start to see, how this works. You can move this stuff all around. You can add them. You can do all sorts of things. I can add additional ones to there. I can close these. But it really allows you very quickly in a much more diversified way to kind of say, oh, I don't know, I think I really want this down here. I'm going to move this one up here. I'm going to add some more notes. I think you might find it being a fun, easy way to start to explore this first module in terms of the interconnectedness between sustainability and all these different standards and best practices. So it's something to think about. And again, it's free. A second one is Prezi. And Prezi is an interesting program. Some of you may have already used it. It can be a bit more interactive in terms of presentations. It lets you create a very large, complex mind map. It lets you zoom in on different areas so you can screen capture those. It's a bit more user-friendly in that context than the mind map. A mind map is a little difficult to be able to try to print and pull out, but it's something to be able to think about. We'll go ahead and take a look here at one that we did from our studio. So this is my Prezi account. Again, Prezi has a special educators discount. So when you sign up with your CU Denver email address, and you will get Prezi for free. They're all public and available for anybody to take a look at. This is an example of one, Duckery, from last semester's studio. And as you can see, different components to it. You can zoom in. If we go in and do a presentation on this, it lets you zoom in on different components. It lets you add, again, it's similar to a mind map in terms of how it's working. Really becomes your preference as far as which one you would like to do. For this coming session, you will need to do some type of a visualization of the relationships, comparisons, redundancies, or sort of interconnectedness or synergies between these different ones. So take a look at these as possible options for you. Okay. Moving on, this is our last little bookkeeping item. You should all have an active YouTube account. I have an active account where I am hosting quite a few things which you will be accessing to take a look at as part of this lecture and other things as we continue to build. This is my YouTube dashboard. I've got a variety of things in here. When I'm posting videos from you guys, I will put them in here, or video from, for instance, right now I'm using Snagit for this lecture. I will convert that into a YouTube video. It will be both here and then on Canvas. I also keep a collection of playlists. I would really suggest that you guys start to do that too. Here's my playlist, and these are ones very much for the purposes of the class. In fact, one of the things that you'll be doing as part of this lecture today is looking at all of Rob Fleming's 8 videos. I know that's 8, but they're short. We've got some videos on well building, and then one in particular on biophilia and sustainability that Rob's put together. Okay, so moving on. We really want to start, I think, with understanding the current state of sustainability. And so this first module describing as the green morass, because I've really become increasingly aware, as I'm sure all of you have, that sustainability around green systems has exploded in the last 10 years. And it's done so in a way that has, like a lot of things, not tried to address the standards or the methods by which we work and build things currently, but create a whole nother direction and a whole nother set of standards. And that layering of standards is good, but it becomes extremely complicated. And then every time someone feels that somehow those new standards are deficient, another standard is put on top, and another and another. So, and as opposed to doing my typical thing, which is to dive right into a project and start going like crazy people, we're going to be a bit thoughtful and reflective on just where are things. And as landscape architects, as I mentioned earlier, sustainability is becoming increasingly intertwined with place and people. And that's one thing that architects definitely can use a little help on. So as we really start to look at that, this is a new design for a school in Philadelphia. And clearly it's not just the building and the structure, it's all these other things that are going on with it. So that's where we're really going to start this process. So sustainable design, green building, green construction, it is both the structure and the landscape, and the using of processes that are environmentally responsible and resource efficient. And that's really where this has come from. So if we start to think about that throughout a building or landscape's life cycle, and we're looking at planning and design and construction and operation and maintenance, renovation and demolition, all of those things of this, it becomes very difficult to say that silos work, that it really does make sense to have, this delineation between these different perspectives. So our goal is to focus very much on landscape as our top priority, but understanding through this class the interconnectedness of both, and then the interconnected of that with people and with communities. And so I think it was interesting if you think about this idea of summarizing green building in terms of where it has been coming from as this combination of economy, utility, durability, and comfort. And I think comfort is one that is sort of an interesting one to kind of add on to there. So as we start to think about this, whether we like it or not, LEED is the thing, and it's been around the longest, and is the most developed. Started in 1994 as really just sort of one standard. And although I don't have all the facts on it, I believe that a lot of the green building efforts did come out of Denver and Colorado back during that period. LEED has since, in developing that, evolved into a much more comprehensive set of standards, very comprehensive set of standards that cover design and construction to maintenance and operation through different types of buildings and sites and neighborhoods. So it really has expanded. I would suggest that you guys spend a little bit of time looking at that just so you understand that evolution, because I think it is an interesting one. The United States Green Building Council oversees these standards, and definitely have been architecture and AIA driven. I'm not particularly crazy about the price tag they put on these standards, Frankly, I think they ought to be free, but that's something for you guys to start to think about. So basically, key 7 goals. Again, a lot of this I'm sure you're already aware of, so I'm not spending much time on it. Reversing global climate change, enhancing individual human wealth and well-being. Oops, sorry about that. Protect and restore water resources, protect and enhance and restore biodiversity and ecosystem services, promote sustainable and regenerative material resource cycles, build a greener economy, enhance social equity, environmental justice, community health, and the quality of life. Now, I'm not going to editorialize here, but I want you guys, as you start to look at this, to decide some pieces of this, yes, they're doing better. Others certainly are not their priority. But that is the overall goals that are identified for it. So, moving forward, this is going to be a text-heavy presentation. So, sorry about that. We'll get into things more visually pleasing as we move on. But there's something that's interesting. So you've got 1994, it started. Around 2009, you see the first sort of more comprehensive set of standards. And then there's been 2 other sort of natural expansions that have occurred with LEED. And that is around 1, the site and neighborhood context. And then 2, human comfort and well-being. Although those things were always in there, just how they really didn't emphasize it that much. The U.S. Green Building Council does acknowledge, excuse me while I fix my typos as we're talking, does acknowledge the Center for Disease Control and their environmental quality, indoor environmental quality. I think what's been interesting with that is that their definition of this is the quality of a building's environment in relationship to health and well-being of those who occupy space within it. And I've just got a couple notes on here. There have been a lot of surveys, studies that have been done that have really compared in a controlled and quantifiable way non-LEED building versus LEED buildings. And overall, the finding has been, as you can see down here, really no significant influence of LEED certification on occupant satisfaction in consideration of the overall building and workspace ratings. So yes, it's really been about the material, the act of construction, but it really, although we say it's getting into the aesthetics, it really doesn't seem to be doing what it needs to do in terms of the people who are in the building and how they feel about it. Another piece that LEED has evolved is this idea of operations and maintenance. Who says a building can't learn new tricks and what it is? So I think and that'll be something where as we get into our project, we're going to be looking at existing buildings and existing systems where we come in as landscape architects. We're here, we're looking at the overall grounds. We're looking at the interconnectedness between what's going on in the building. What are the views outside of the windows? How does that connect to the landscape and the community? If we've got gardens, or do we have kitchens? If we have modular units, how do they interrelate? What is that inside-outside connection? So this has been, I think, a good one to be able to take a look at. I think so often LEED has been perceived as something that is about new buildings and new construction, and the fact that that is not the case. So this is where I want to introduce Rob Fleming. Rob is the chair of the Philadelphia University's Masters of Sustainability program. And Rob is going to be providing support on this class, both in terms of the lectures that you're about to watch. There's 8 of them in total. Total viewing time for those is 65 minutes. So they're about 5 to 8 minutes each on average. These videos, again, are part of my playlist, and you can follow that link to these. And I'm just going to pull up one here so you can see Rob. And you know, I think what's great about Rob is that he has also been developing an online program and has cracked the code on how to do online classes. I'm hoping to greatly improve my online skills here. But this is Rob, and Rob is an architect, but he's an extremely thoughtful architect. He has spent a lot of time dealing with the ideas of sustainability and LEED. He has a lot of, I think, experience, and I think you will find these series of lectures of his helpful as an entree into at least the different sections and practices of sustainable architecture and LEED, but how we might want to start to frame this in terms of our discussion. And again, you guys may already be very well familiar with LEED, but I think what Rob brings to this is this idea of sustainability, and that LEED is not just because something's LEED certified doesn't mean it's sustainable, and what is LEED in the context of these larger things. So either now you can stop my video and go look at these, or you can look at them afterwards. So this is an interesting twist that is extremely new, and it is the creation of well building standards. And seeing the deficit in LEED, a gentleman by the name of Paul Scialla, I'm hoping I'm saying his name right, basically spent 7 years developing the Delos platform, which I'm not quite sure. Paul is a businessman. He reminds me a little bit of Kimball Musk and what Kimball has been doing with the kitchen community and learning gardens. What happens when you take a businessman and basically for-profit individual and bring him into the nonprofit world? Well, what you get is the well building standard at Delos, and his well building standard includes research, consulting, real estate development, and innovative solutions for the built environment. And it really is about creating spaces that nurture and promote health and well-being. And so during this process, what Paul did was to say, okay, well, LEED's okay, but what about science, and what about healthcare, and what about human sustainability, and how do I bring environmental sustainability or LEED and bring in a stronger emphasis that is transdisciplinary, that is based on science and the health industry, and really think about what is individual health and well-being. So the guy is kind of brilliant because he's created this, and basically in 2013 got Clinton to help him launch this as a global initiative, and really sort of create basically these 7 concepts of the well building standard. Unlike AIA, this is free. The standards are free. You can download them. And really starting to look at this idea of air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. Levels of well certification, similar, you know, you've got silver, gold, platinum. In terms of how you start to get into there, it is global, which I think is interesting in terms of the way that has evolved. And it is new. There are no standards for schools yet and school buildings. So I'm really hoping that some of the things that we begin to look at around these actually can be part of information that they can use. So who is Paul? So I think this is pretty interesting. Again, on my YouTube site, there's a series of 4 or 5 1 or 2 minute sound bites. So here's Paul. And as you can see over here, we've got 4 little quickie clips that are all about what Paul has created and why he thinks it's important. This was some of the things that he's been doing, and so I want you guys to definitely take a look at it. I think it is a welcome addition to LEAD. And so one of the things I really want you guys to look at is comparing those two. One certainly comes from a people focus, I think that's very interesting. I will download the criteria and standards on Canvas so that you will have those. So this has been a pretty fast trajectory that Paul's been on this. That's what happens, I think, when you get money involved. What has been interesting in 2015, his well building standard and his institute have joined forces with the Green Building Council. It's a natural fit. Again, though, we're starting to talk about a lot of different kinds of standards, and none of those standards are governmentally controlled. They're all by basically an external third-party group. I think they're a welcome introduction to it. So then the question is, well, what about the landscape architects, and where are they in all of this? And of course, they have now launched their Sustainable Sites Initiative, which is also developing some sort of a connection with the U.S. Green Building Council. It is different in that it is a site registration as opposed to LEED, where you can not only get a building certified, but you as a designer or builder can be certified. So it's a little bit different in that context. It's also a very expensive process to go through if you want your site certified. But it is a comprehensive rating system that is designed to distinguish sustainable landscapes, measure their performance, and elevate their value. So it is a certification for projects, and it does say development projects, but I think we really want to try to take a look at what is it, how does it relate to well building, how does it relate to LEED, which has a sustainable sites component, which has a neighborhood context component. So again, here are these points of interconnection between these. What should you as a designer's guiding principle be in terms of which one do you bring in, which one do you use, and what's your overall opinion of them? Because I think that is important to, and I have to shut this off, nothing like having that, so that's something to really kind of think about there in terms of it. Take a look at it, download the Sustainable Sites Initiative. I do have one video that I found that is, in my opinion, not a very good one that talks about the Sustainable Sites Initiative. If any of you find some other ones that you think are good for the class, please feel free to download those. I think it would be helpful to have. But it is, again, brand spanking new. So we are right on the cusp of the convergence of all of these different things. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to come up with. So then this brings in biophilia. And where's that in all of this? Which, again, sites tends to be something that is much more like LEED, I think tends to be a bit more driven by systems and materials and ecological processes. And so I have another YouTube video from you from no one other than Rob Fleming. And I think it's just interesting because he just brings in some interesting things to talk about. Biophilia is a slippery slope that we start to go down. I didn't necessarily include it as a philosophy for you to bring into this module. I let you to choose whether or not you want to include it. So you can or cannot address this as part of this morass. I think it definitely has a place in there. And perhaps that's something that we start to think about as we sort of do filtering through and we look for some of those deficiencies in the standards that we're looking at to see whether or not it's there. So what else? Believe it or not, there is other stuff. And this is an interesting one. It's the Seed Network membership. So this is not necessarily a set of standards or guides. It does fall under best practices. But the Social, Economic, Environmental Design Network is really bringing together similarly minded members of the general public with designers in all of our related fields to talk about community-based design practice. So to me, we have well building that looks at the individual, and then we have seed that looks at sort of community and community practices. And so it's interesting in that respect. I am a member. I would urge all of you to join. It's free. So it's more of these grassroots kinds of organizations that I think are important in the process. But it really is an interesting one. And here's some of the principles. And I think it's, again, it starts to look a bit at the rights of people. It looks at sort of social justice, environmental justice, which is something that I have not seen to be that heavily emphasized or strongly in the way SEED does in these other components. So, SEED principles: advocate with those who have limited voice in public life, to build structures that are inclusive, that engage stakeholders and allow communities to make decisions, to promote social equality through discourse that reflects a range of values and social identities, generate ideas that grow from place and build local capacity, designed to help conserve resources and minimize waste. So again, slightly different, a heavier prioritization on local peoples and populations and cultures and materials, but still certainly rooted in a lot of the other things that are going on. So this is an interesting twist that perhaps deals with environmental justice at a grassroots level. This is not part of the principles. This is my editorial comments, and I'm sure you guys are going to start to have some of your own as well. But it's a good one. Not as much information on that. You will want to go to the website, and you'll want to, and all of those sites are hyperlinked on the course syllabus. So just go on the assignment. So go there to take a look at them. So there, really what we're looking at is examples of projects. They do have a couple books out. I have not read those books or looked at them yet. But that's something that you'll want to start to explore. So what about all of this? What about other regulations? We have uniform building codes, rules and regulations at a federal, state, and local level. And I do find it interesting that these other efforts have grown out of the deficiencies in these codes. So what happens? And so that's part, I think, of the opinion piece as part of your assignment that I'd like you guys to take a look at is how does that fit together? What do you see in terms of how this kind of moves forward? I mean, to have these different layers and layers of rules and regulations seems at some point like there's a 900-pound gorilla in the room and it's the U.S. Green Building Code? At what point do we say, okay, we're going to adopt them at a state level or at a federal level where they just become part of everyday practice as opposed to something quote-unquote special? So I want you to think about that as you read over sort of your opinion piece that you'll be doing as part of this assignment. Next week, green schools. I'll be putting together then the next lecture that dives a little bit deeper into school-based efforts around these things. But I think this will give you more than enough information to start to explore and look at this week. Thank you, and I look forward to our doodling and our conversations.